Good morning, everyone. And as you may have noticed, I am in a very different outfit, and that's because it's snowing and it's absolutely freezing. So this is what people think usually when they think about Sweden, apart from IKEA and meatballs. And let me tell you, what's most likely going to happen is that this is what's going to be happening for a day or two, and then it's going to get warm enough so that everything melts, and then it's going to freeze over, and everything is basically going to be ice. I'm going to be walking on ice. And well, let's see if I survive that. Usually it's here in Sweden it's the most common reason for injury overall, and that's a happy thought. It's not gunshots or mugging or anything like that. It's old people falling over in winter. But enough about that, let's get to it. So in this video I'm going to talk to you about basically a bit of stuff that we're doing at work today, and the importance that having a solid foundation, having a solid understanding of the problem that you're facing is going to, like, the value of a solid strategy or a pattern, if you will. Now, I'm one of those people who will argue that being a philosophical programmer, and usually what happens when you go with a pattern, like a design pattern of some sort, is that people will, especially when they're young, like when they're younger in their career, they will add a design pattern more because they read about it and that they kind of think that this is a good fit for this type of problem. However, what often happens is that they apply it without really understanding why they are applying it. So I'll give you a good example. So we're working on a feature at work where basically the objective is to, based on transaction information from different, from users' bank accounts, basically figure out what different cases for subscriptions, basically figuring out what's a subscription and what's just a single payment, or maybe something of that nature. And there are all kinds of different tricky ways that people can have subscription events. I mean, you can have multiple subscriptions to the same company. You can, like, my favorite one is what happens if you have a gym membership, which you pay on a monthly basis, but every week you buy a candy bar in the shop at your local gym. In transaction terms, that's actually going to pop up as a sequence of payments to the same company with almost no distinction whatsoever. That is a very, very tricky problem. Now, the way that I thought, basically we started thinking about this was that because this is a massively complicated problem that is going to exist with the company for a very long time, we had this discussion, a design discussion about the algorithm, how to actually do this. And this is the sort of basically we have to detect different interval sequences, like, is it a yearly subscription, it's a monthly, different versions of possible subscriptions. And see, the thing is that if it's only really now, this is probably the first time ever. Well, no, not ever. I have had the opportunity to use a builder pattern at one point as well, but this is the first time I've ever actually gotten to use or had the idea of using, a fancier pattern than basically a factory pattern. Factory pattern, you can look that up. It's very common in object-oriented programming, and I've been using that for a few years now. But basically what I was suggesting is that because we basically have no idea of knowing how we are going to be able to do these interval detections, so over time we're going to have different solutions and improve our methodology for detecting different types of intervals. Because as I was saying, the easy ones is the time-based intervals, so you just look at the dates, and there are easy, and money and stuff like that. These are the easy ones. The tricky ones are the corner cases, and these corner cases are going to drop in over time. So I said, okay, this sounds to me like a very good fit for a strategy pattern, where and the strategy pattern basically is that you have a common interface for doing a certain type of computation, and then under the hood, you can basically add different solutions to a hash map or a list or something like that, and then you run your data set through the different solutions, and they will all try to you can do it, by just requiring a specific type of strategy to solving a problem. Like it say that you have payments, say that one strategy would be to pay by MasterCard, one would be to pay by Visa, and so forth. And the reason why you have this is because although the payment, like from the caller's perspective, the payment should work the same way. You should have a function of some sort, you should call it, and the payment should go through. But under the hood, integrating to MasterCard is very different from integrating to Visa, for example, or PayPal. So that's why the strategy pattern exists. So you can have this common interface that scales very well over time. And so basically that's been originally it was a hard sell to kind of get this into the roadmap in the company, because a few of my colleagues didn't really agree. But it's only really now, after a few weeks of having my colleagues trying to figure out the grand algorithm, like basically the approach that they tried to do, which I told them this is not going to work, most likely not going to work, is to have one algorithm that solves all of these problems. And I told them, the problem is, in my opinion, way too big for one single function that is going to handle all of that. That function is going to get enormous. I don't know anything about Google's search algorithm, but I find it very difficult to believe that there's a single function that can find all the stuff that Google finds. So, anywho. And this is the only time I've actually gotten to use, or rather, we're going to start using it now, using a pattern. And the reason I want to talk to you about this is because this takes a little bit of experience to get a feel for, but I didn't suggest this pattern because I wanted to use the pattern, which is usually the case. I suggested it because I've been in this situation and solved these types of problems enough times that I know that this is a very good solution to this sort of problem. And that's a big distinction. Another extremely good example of when a pattern is a good use case. Take the builder pattern, for example. Let's say that you have an API integration to some logging system or so forth, and you want to abstract away all the methods and and so forth on that interface, basically. Then maybe you would like to think about a builder pattern where you can build up a specific request and execute that request within your own domain language. That's also a fairly good use case for a builder pattern. However, what I'm urging you to think about is to, because you're going to get there. Trust me, if you're not there yet, you're going to get there. You're going to get really good at programming. Trust me, you will. If you just stick with it, you're going to get good. And when you are at that point, you're going to get more into patterns and best practices, because you're going to want to improve, keep on improving your skill set. And this is where I'm telling you, read about the patterns, but try to, try to listen to your colleagues, try to avoid using a pattern for the sake of using a pattern. Just be patient and wait, and just keep on working, trying to do the best work you can. And sooner or later, a situation like the one that I'm in right now will arrive, where you actually get to use some of that knowledge, or you can actually apply it in a sane way, because otherwise you might end up making something that is very, very more overly complicated for your specific situation. I know I've been there so many times. I started doing provider pattern when I was in school. It was absolutely insanity. There was no reason for me to do it. Like basic small applications that I overcomplicated a lot by simply not understanding when to use a given technique. Think of it as being a martial artist. You train and you train and you train, and then you learn some fancy new techniques, and a master martial artist knows exactly when to use these fancier techniques to get some extra points in the ring. But he or she, that person uses them very rarely, because usually it's good enough. That person can win the fight by simply using the basics and have a solid foundation. But a amateur will try to go for these, fancier techniques, and usually it ends up with a big mess. So try to have that mentality. Learn, like, the fancy techniques are coming, but learn when to use them and when not to use them.